أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ورضي الله تعالى عن سادة التابعين وعلماء العاملين وأئمة الأربعة المجتهدين ومقلديهم إلى يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته everyone. Alhamdulillah, we'd like to welcome you all to our weekly installment, our weekly gathering, our weekly think tank, our weekly roundtable, our weekly powwow, our weekly barbecue called the Black Imams Roundtable. This is where we put our heads together, we analyze our situation, we try to find the best ways to move forward, and we try to clarify those things that aren't clear. And we often talk about those things that other people don't want to talk about, among other things. And the Black Imams. And so you look in the comments, it doesn't matter how you're watching YouTube, Facebook. You can find the ways that you can donate. Just put Roundtable in the comment section so they know how to divide up the money. So if you come in at the beginning, you do all that in the beginning, you ain't got to worry about it later, inshallah. And if you've been coming here, you know we keep you updated as we get closer and closer to our weekly $500 goal. Alhamdulillah. Now that I've said all of that, we want to discuss, as the title clearly indicates, we want to clarify the belief, clarify the aqidah, clarify the creed. And we are talking specifically for our context here in America. Maybe if we lived in another place with a different type of fitna, then maybe our clarification would look a little different. Maybe the issues that we raise would sound maybe other issues. But in America, when it comes to the belief system, the belief of the Muslims, it is not clear. Even though many of us think that it's actually clear, and it's actually not clear. So, being that I'm the one who went to the store, meaning I'm the one who opened up, I wanted to talk about one of the things I want to talk about that I want to clarify is, what is a Wahhabi? What is a Wahhabi? Some of you think that a Wahhabi is just some offensive nicknames that we use for people that we don't like. Some of you really think that. Even some of you that come to our classes, you still think that, some of you. Oh, they just use the term Wahhabi. They're calling somebody a name. Some of us think that a Wahhabi is someone who is harsh against the Muslims. They don't get along with the rest of the Muslims, and they have a minhaj and they throw people off of it. And if you get thrown off the minhaj, then you're not a Wahhabi anymore. All of us have these vague ideas about what a Wahhabi is or what a Wahhabi isn't. See, someone says, we shouldn't call each other offensive nicknames. See, people think that the term Wahhabi is an offensive nickname, and it's not. And there are going to be some people, it doesn't matter what you say or how much you explain it, they're still going to think it's an offensive nickname. So, what is a Wahhabi? A Wahhabi is used to identify the followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who died in 1206 or 1792 Christian era. What is a Wahhabi? It is used to identify the followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, who died in 1792 Christian era, regardless if they were his followers during his lifetime or even after his death. Just a little brief thing about Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He came from a traditional Hanbali Muslim family. In other words, his family was Ahlul Sunnatil wal Jama'ah. They were traditional Sunnis. He broke from that tradition after being influenced by the writings of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. We're talking about Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Ibn Taymiyyah, who died 728 after Hijrah, or 1328 Christian era. He then formulated a new creed based primarily on Ibn Taymiyyah's teachings, but he also added a few of his own innovations. I hope you caught that. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab formulated his own belief system. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab formulated his own belief system. That's extremely important to understand. Continuing, Imam, Amin, you wanted to say something? It looked like you wanted to interject.
Oh no, I was in the back clowning.
Oh, okay.
I took that thing off and I was just changed my whole speech. Get ready. Right.
So continuing, this creed, which contradicts that of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, has hallmarks, is characterized by a few things. One of the things that is characterized is by a literal interpretation of Allah's divine attributes, giving Allah human or bodily attributes, putting Allah in a place, and likening him to his creation. The Wahhabi creed, you can also, because maybe you're not studious, how do I know if I'm learning the regular normative Islamic belief system or I'm caught up in this Wahhabi thing? Wahhabi creed is characterized by dividing Allah's oneness into three parts. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, oneness of Allah's lordship. Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, oneness of Allah's divinity. And Tawheed al-Asma' wa Sifat, oneness of Allah's name and attributes. The modern day Wahhabiyya now call themselves Salafi. The modern Wahhabiyya now call themselves Salafi. And some people may say, well, why is it, I can't get it, you calling them Wahhabi, like, that isn't right. They wouldn't agree with that. Doesn't matter what they agree. When someone does a crime, you don't allow them to choose which code of the law that you're going to get punished under. It don't work like that, right? They were called Wahhabis during their time. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's brother, Sulayman, ibn Abdul Wahhab was a scholar. And he refuted his own brother. I haven't updated in the English translation of his brother's work. It's the same book.
Does it have the tahqiq of Bin Baz? I told you I'm in clown mode. I'm just joking.
The name of that book in Arabic is Sawaqul Illahiyya fi Raddi al Wahhabiyya. The divine lightning in refuting the Wahhabiyya. So Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's blood brother, their father's Abdul Wahhab, he refers to his brother and his movement by a Wahhabiyya. So who are you to come 200 years later, 300 years later, talking about shouldn't call him Wahhabi? The scholars of their time, while he was living, called them Wahhabis. They identified them because their belief system is different. It contradicts the creed of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And so, because he created something new, he codified, he organized a new belief, it got named after him. That's extremely important. One more thing before I pass the mic. In this country, even before the late 80s and the early 90s, the Wahhabis were planting their seeds. So many of us were Wahhabis and didn't even know it. We were just Muslim in our minds, but in our belief system, we were Wahhabis and we didn't know it. It wasn't our intention. It wasn't even our fault. Prior to the 1990s, his teachings were spread more subtly, and his books were published under the name Muhammad ibn Sulaiman at-Tamimi. Many of us read his book, Mubadi Islam, right? Who's the author? Shaykhul Islam, Muhammad ibn Sulaiman at-Tamimi, not knowing that this was Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's name is Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab ibn Sulaiman ibn Ali ibn Muhammad ibn Ahmed ibn Rashid at-Tamimi. So, you know, a lot of times they do that in Arabic. They have the person's name and ibn, their grandfather. And so, you know, they took out, you know, the thing that he was known by, you know, Abdul Wahhab, Wahhabi. They took out the Abdul Wahhab. They trick us in the English language. And I can speak from personal experience that, you know, a lot of my early books during my early days of Islam were from that author, not knowing that it's Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. And so just another term that we use a lot, and that term is default Wahhabi. What's a default Wahhabi? A default Wahhabi is someone who's a Wahhabi and don't know that they're a Wahhabi, like a lot of us. We said the Wahhabi, no, of course, they don't agree with that term. They now call themselves Salafi. But even people, some people that don't even call themselves Salafi, they know I'm not Salafi, I'm not none of that stuff. I'm just Muslim. So how can you say that person is a Wahhabi? What is his belief? His belief is the same as Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He organized, he codified it. He redefined things. He redefined worship. So the belief is not the belief of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. The belief is the one organized and codified by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. So that is Wahhabism. Whether you know never even heard of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, you can be a Wahhabi. So many people, like myself, I was a default Wahhabi. I was never a Wahhabi. I was never a card-carrying Wahhabi, right? I was a default Wahhabi. And I'm making these. One of the reasons why I wanted to begin and clarify this is because a lot of us, even people that in our classes regularly, they're confused. They will say things like, well, they don't like so and so anymore. They kicked him off the minhaj, so he's not Salafi anymore. No, you don't even understand what a Salafi / Wahhabi is. Because if you understood what one was, him getting kicked off or put on or not liked anymore is irrelevant. What is his belief system? Does he have the belief of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab? Yes, he's a Wahhabi. It doesn't matter if the other Wahhabis like him or not. A lot of times Imam Amin, name names, right? A lot of times Imam Amin is going off, name names. Shouldn't have to name names. If you know what a Wahhabi is, he don't have to tell you, because it's really not about that person. It's about the belief that we need to clarify. And if you understand what the proper belief is and what it isn't, then we wouldn't have to worry about who's on it today or who's off it today. So I hope that these definitions cleared some things up, and I won't hog the mic anymore. I'll pass it off to Imam of the Boombat or Imam Otis.
Okay, yeah, I'll go, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah and alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil anbiya wa mursaleen sayyidina wa habibina al-Mustafa Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Alhamdulillah, we thank you all for joining us tonight on the Black Imams Roundtable, mashallah. And I'll try to follow up with that great intro by the genius, inshallah. And so I'm caught in between a rock and a hard place. You know, the genius precedes me, and then Otis comes after me. So, you know, I don't know how I'm going to do it. So, alhamdulillah. But yeah, this is very important as we clarify the creed, because, you know, many times when we are having these discussions, you know, some people take it as like attacks and, you know, but it's really about clarification. And in the absence of people who follow a certain creed, not wanting to have a discussion because they call it debates and they say that debating and argumentation is not from the Sunnah, then it will seem one-sided, you know. And this is something that we've been calling for, you know, for some years now, to have an open discussion with some of these people who adhere to these tenets of this belief or this splinter group. Because, you know, a lot of people say, well, what's the purpose of it? Does it help us? You know, does it help Muslims? You know, what does it have to do with unity and all this kind of stuff? It has a lot to do with unity, because we have to see where the rift and where the divide and the split came in, you know. So, for instance, you know, as when we say the term Wahhabi, you know, it is the same, because people say, you've heard this before, where they say that one of Allah's names is Al-Wahhab. Don't use it, you know, it's disrespectful to Allah's name. Yeah, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is known as Al-Jabbar. And yet we have a splendid group called the Jabariyah, you know. Allah is known as Al-Qadir, right? And we have a group called the Qadiriyah, you know. Allah is Al-Kareem. And we have a group that's deviated called the Karamiyah, you know. So Al-Wahhabiyya is not the same as Al-Wahhab, you know. And Al-Wahhabiyya are those people who follow Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, or Ibn Abdul Wahhab. As you know, I've been someone correct me, said don't use the name Muhammad because, you know, because it's a sacred name, you know. Although we're not talking about Rasulullah, so Islam, but when you have to really go back and see where the rift started to begin, and in these last, you know, 250 years, 300 years, many of us, we have been, you know, isolated from history, you know, because when we say Wahhabi, it really pinpoints it where the movement began. And if you know the history of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, so it's beyond that romanticized version that, you know, he was traveling through his town, he learned through his teachers, and then he came in his area, and the people were steeped in what they call, in the translation, polytheistic practices. So it started right from there, that he said in his mind, without any precedence, without any consultation from any ulama, without consulting the muftis that were there and the qadis that were there, or even his own father, that he deemed on his own that the people in Mecca and Medina were committing shirk. And now when you look at the timeline, when he started his da'wah, which was around 1144, I think, after Hijri, right? 1144 after Hijri. And so we in 1445 after Hijri. So it's recent times. He took it upon himself to declare the Muslims who were in the Hijaz, right? He called them mushriks. And because of his faulty understanding of issues like tawassul and istighatha and tabarruk, and so this is a problem of, there are two extensions from this. First, him thinking that he has the ability to reform Islam, which extends from Ibn Taymiyyah, going against, ijma in many cases, thinking of your own mind, thinking that you have the capability to do things on your own without a precedence, and this is not the way of Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. So thinking in his mind that he can reform Islam and coming with a technicality against the Muslims, and so an assault against the Muslims about their sins and their mistakes and errors is by extension the characteristics of the Khawarij. So when you think about the Khawarij during the early times, what was their minhaj? What was their methodology? That they threw the Muslims out of Islam based on major sins and other things that they did. And so this is the same concept, throwing Muslims out of Islam for a perceived act of shirk or kufr or whatever he did, and use it as justification to slaughter Muslims. So when you read in those fancy books, they will say, things like, he purified the land from shirk and kufr. Where was the shirk and kufr 1,000 years after the time of the Prophet ﷺ? And we do know history that, shirk was eradicated during the time of the Prophet ﷺ when he sent Ali, radiallahu anhu wa karramallahu wajhahu, to the Kaaba and destroyed all of the idols. Shirk was removed then, So how is it that he came later and said that these people like they weren't people who said La ilaha illallah? He said it as if these were people that were Muslims with 1,000-year history in the Holy Lands. And so he took it upon himself. And, if you look at his history, he was rejected in some places he went to. His father even criticized him. And as Imam Naim showed us the two books where his brother wrote a very thorough refutation on him using the same sources that he claimed to follow. Because if you look at Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he said out of his own mouth that he preferred the opinions of Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah over other established opinions. So in other words, whatever we said over here that's already been documented and precedented, he said, no, I'm going to go with what I understand from this. My understanding I've taken from these two sheikhs, that's what I'm going to go with. And so then he realized that he had to get power in the Arabian Peninsula. So he started going to these tribal, people, and he ran into Muhammad ibn Saud. And now if you really study, if you look at history, you don't really hear much about Muhammad ibn Saud. You don't really hear much about him and who he was. And so the people who are the, like this romanticized version, they'll say that he was one of the leader of the tribes. He didn't have any authority. He was a leader of his tribe, but he wasn't the leader of the land. And so they made a pact, where I believe it was Muhammad ibn Saud, one of his sons, married one of the daughters of Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And from that union springs the Al Sheikh family, which is the ruling religious authority family in Saudi Arabia. And through Muhammad ibn Saud, the rulers, the kingdom that they have all descend from that pairing, And so he didn't have the authority in the land, because if you see someone doing a munkar, and you're in an Islamic country, you have to report it to the authorities. He didn't have the authority to take it upon himself to attack and slaughter Muslims, right? And these are people, wallahi, these were Muslims. When you hear these people saying, they were saying that the Muslims who were here were people who were committing shirk. And so then they changed up the whole meaning of La ilaha illallah, ain't even the concept of shirk, because with them, everything is shirk, And we know the precise definition of shirk is to make a partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and believing that thing has some power to cause you harm or good alongside with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so not every instance that things are shirk that may even seem like shirk, and that's the distinction that the Wahhabis, when you study their doctrine, they don't make it. They just say, okay, if someone is wearing an amulet, if someone's wearing a chain, that this is an act of shirk, without clarifying whether it's major shirk or minor shirk, which we know that minor shirk is a major sin and major shirk is kufr. But it has to be proven without a shadow of a doubt, not because what may seem apparent. And so one has to ask, if you look at the history of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, all of these people that he went to war with, almost half of his life, he lived to be like 90-something years old. Almost half of his life, he was at war. Who was he at war with? People who said La ilaha illallah. And we know the sanctity and the sacredness of La ilaha illallah, that the one who says it, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that his blood, his property, and his honor is safe unless he disavows it. And you can't blanketly say that that a group of people have disavowed the Shahada. That it has to be ascertained by each one of them. Did they disbelieve in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after believing in it? So you mean to tell me all these people approached, he asked them, did they disavow Allah? Did they believe that there was another God besides Allah? All of these things? No, he didn't do that. He killed these people in masse, to have political power, to have gain and control over the Haramain, and then some of the things that they developed, because the movement started as war and conquering and not as scholarship, because when you go back and look at it, many of the characteristics that you see now, that they abandoned the four schools of fiqh, that the Ash'aris and Maturidis to them, which has been established as the people of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah in Aqidah for centuries, they called them kuffar and stuff like that. And then even when you read some of these books now, they said that all of the lands that were besides them, we're talking about lands that had a tradition of Islam in Egypt and Sham and all of these places, they said that these were the lands of the kuffar. They in his own writing, he said that he instructed the people who followed his movement, do not travel to those lands. And these were lands that were historically Islamic, for centuries. And so now then when they conquered the land and they killed all of the enemies, they killed all of the people who opposed them, and one thing that they don't tell you, and you can read this in certain books, that he had over 60 scholars that were refuting him during this time. And some of them, they were adamant about it, and they wrote about it, but you won't really, a cursory search online, you won't find it. But you have to look at some of the name of the prominent scholars that was refuting his movement right from the very beginning. And these are people that they ended up killing and jailing and putting in exile and stuff like that. And then also you should study, after the time that Ibn Abdul Wahhab passed away, that this current Saudi state went through 3 phases. It went through 3 phases before it really got established as the Mamlaka. So the first stage, they almost got wiped out. Because the Ottoman Empire was still in charge. And so the Khalifa sent people there to remove these people because of the fitna they was causing. So now you'll read from the apologists of the Wahhabi movement, or the people who adhere to it, they will say that, they have power in the land and all this kind of stuff, and it's nonsense. So the first movement, it was almost wiped out, and then some of Ibn Abdul Wahhab's sons, and they were put in exile in Egypt. Then the second state of the movement, they started to make a comeback, but then they started having internal disputes about who was supposed to be the leader. And then, then they were in fights with the local, the Rashidi clan and those who were already there. And then the third wave, the third movement of the Saudi state started to see when the British started to come in. And then Abdullah Aziz ibn Saud, who was, I think he was the grandson of Muhammad ibn Saud, that he really made the effort to, unite the kingdom again with the support of the British. And in the interim, I can't remember, it was the second or the third Saudi state that they starved the Muslims so bad that the Muslims had to start eating dogs. They had to start eating dogs, right? And so the last part of the Saudi state was established in 1932, and the assistance of these Wahhabis with the British, they conspired to dismantle the Khilafah. I think it was in 1924. So all of this was a conspiracy to obtain power in the land, because Ibn Abdul Wahhab knew that whoever had power over the Haramain, that the Muslims, regardless of what, will see them as a leader, because no Muslims is going to really, take the initiative to attack the Kaaba and stuff like that. And, the city of the Prophet ﷺ is very sacred. So he knew that much. And so some of the things that came out of this movement was a concept and belief that tried to undermine the Muslims who engaged in these topics of tabarak, istighatha, and tawassul. And his faulty understanding made him come up where he basically said in these three tawheeds, rububiyyah, uluhiyyah, and asma wa sifat, he basically said that the Muslims and the non-Muslims, the Jews and Christians, believe in rububiyyah the same, that the only difference was in worship. And that's not true, because to believe in Tawheed Rububiyyah means to accept Islam. To believe in Tawheed Rububiyyah truly, that means you have to say La ilaha illallah. Otherwise, you didn't believe in it truly. And then the pagan Arabs, they also believed in other deities. So it wasn't the same. And this is one of the arguments they try to use. They say that the pagan Arabs have believed in Allah as the same. They just didn't, they just worship other gods. But acknowledging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the one and only one, then that's one thing. But the only way that you understand and accept and digest Tawheed al-Rububiyyah is that you take Shahada. And so the Muslims have already done this. So he's saying, no, that's not enough. Now that this worship that he called worship, so changing the meaning of what ibadah is. So he equated worship, like legislated worship, how we pray 5 times a day and all of the things that we have to know in order to pray. He said that when you go to the grave and you seek Allah's blessing by the rank and the virtue of the person in the grave, they call this worship. And that's not the same thing as worship. And that's why people before him, there was never an issue about this being shirk. Of course, maybe some scholars have said that there were some blameworthy practices, maybe, or some things that may be not approved of, and it's argumentative. But to say that it takes a person outside the fold of Islam is where the problem has arisen. And then, and on top of that, claiming shirk for Muslims and the assault on Muslims on a technicality, and then bypassing the Islamic tradition, not having a Senate, even claiming, now when they change their name to Salafiyah and they claim that it's an ascription to the way of the Salaf, they don't have the Isnad in between. And so it becomes a thing where they're able to pick and choose what they want. And then you find in their reform movement or pseudo-reform movement that, they will take from the madhahib what they feel is most suitable according to the judgments of one person that they rely on in the science of hadith. So there's like a big, what they call that, a big pot of gumbo with their movement, that, they take a part of this Aqidah, they take part of this, they take part of this, and they put it all in a big pot of gumbo, and they call it Salafiyah, which is supposed to be the way of the Salaf, but they're so far removed from that, So, look at some of their books and look at some of the things, and you highlight them in there, and find out where they went wrong. So, and then other than that, some of the things that they really went wrong that is clear as the sun is Akida, is that, that they, they are mujassima, whether it's real or imagined. If they keep affirming that all of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are literal, and that, we just don't know how they are, this is tajsim. This is giving Allah body parts. Saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above the throne, and not as in exaltedness, but as in a location. So they're saying that, with real or imagined, that if they're saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above the throne, that he is in a place, that he is in a location, and he is subjected to proximity and movement. And some of these things they say blatantly, that they believe that Allah moves, that Allah descends literally, down to the lower heavens. They believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, literally laughs. And some of these things you'll find in their own books, And so, in addition to bypassing the tradition, taking upon pseudo scholarship on their own, individual like a maverick type of movement, and assuming, having bad assumptions of the Muslims on technicalities, they have adopted these bad beliefs and attributed them to the way of the Salaf. So you have to look at these things. And so there's some code words and keywords. So there are certain people that they rely on that you should be careful of, that they say that they are major scholars. Some of you know about the big three: Bin Baz, Uthaymin, and Al-Albani. They give scholarship to scholars who don't meet the criteria. For instance, you have some of them. Imam Naim said he was a default Wahhabi. I was a card carrying Madkhali, so I like mine hardcore all around the board. So if I'm gonna be hardcore, I gotta be hardcore. So I was a hardcore Madkhali, you know what I mean? And so they said that this man, Rabi'a Madkhali, that he was the Imam of Jarh wa Ta'dil. This is a specialized science hadith, a specialized science in hadith that only a few achieve, that you have to have certain qualifications. And the only qualification that he had was that he talked trash about people. And, when N-words get that, they just run with it. He don't have no 100,000 hadith on cap with the isnad. And the ones that they say is greater than him don't even have it. Al-Albani. And so some of these things, when you go back and look, like, these people just blatantly lied. And I tell you, I remember these days, because when they caught in their lies, what they do is they just retract and just erase the stuff that they put online like it never happened. I remember them saying that Al-Albani, Uthaymin, Bin Baz, and I think it was another one. They said that they were mujtahidun mutlaqun. Mujtahidun mutlaqun. I swear by Allah, I remember reading them saying, because I used to, as a medical, I had to read all that stuff because you had to be in the know before you get kicked off the minhaj. It was like a time bomb. One step, kaboom, bid'ah fills the room. So I used to read all that stuff all the time, and it was never anything for the soul, And so, and then in addition to that, just all of the stuff that they believe, who they call scholars, what they reference, their aversion to the madhahib, to the schools of the Aqidah, the Ashari and Maturidi schools, where they used to just say that they were Ahl Bid'ah straight out. They're changing it up now because they've been exposed, and so many other things. So I don't want to take too much time with that, and so many blunders that they have had because of not having a traditional connection to the Salaf. It's only a name. It's almost like us, their only connection to the Salaf is like our direct connection to the motherland. It's been broken. We have to piece together, because of what happened to us when we go to the motherland, where our lineage comes from. And they do the same thing. They're piecing together their connection to the Salaf, but there's no continuous chain. And they have been challenged, and they continue to be challenged to bring that chain. and they can't do it because their followers, their leaders who they rely on, and some of the other things, that Ibn Abdullah was a mujaddid, subhanallah. This man was a killer of Muslims, and in his own deluded mind, he was doing something great. What kind of person thinks they does something great in killing the people of La ilaha illallah? Subhanallah. All right, but I'll stop there because Imam Amin, he went and got a book, so this grade be good.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Excuse me that you may see me laughing, but y'all ever heard that saying, you have to laugh or keep from crying? It's sad that we as a people, especially us, others have been affected, but I don't think no one got messed up with this stuff more than African Americans. I travel the world. That's why I'm saying that. I've traveled the world. I've been in many places. And the bad traces of these ideas, its impact in the African American community has been devastating, right? So when I hear people finding it difficult to talk about these subjects, I'm empathetic towards that, but also realize why it's a necessity. Because most of us, and I have a concern for Black people, I do, because not enough people have a concern for us. Muslim, non-Muslim, don't matter. Not enough people have a concern for Black people. They don't. If it was us, what is happening in Palestine right now, it wouldn't be such an outcry. It would not be. And we know it because we've suffered worse and there's still no outcry, right? What the Jews went through in Nazi Germany, what the Palestinians are going through under the Zionist regime is nothing compared to what African American people have went through in the span of their sojourn here in North America, what they went through on the African continent to get here, and what they went through before they got in those chains. But that's like, let bygones be bygones. And we're still affected by it. And here we are, after getting through all this thing, trying to find our way back to our religious salvation, and here we come with a deviant ideology to divert us from that path and plunder us in deeper confusion. For me, I have an issue with that. And the doctrine is set up such that we'll never get past it. You know why? Because they programmed our people against us. See, a lot of y'all don't study. A lot of the people who be like, yeah, you don't study. I know you don't. Just the way you talk, I know you don't study. And I don't mean that to criticize. I'm just being honest. You don't study. It's obvious. You don't read. You don't research. You just blind follow. That's obvious. It's like quite clear for anyone who critically examines information. You just like slogans. Quran and Sunnah. That's a nice slogan. It works. I don't have to know nothing about the Quran or the Sunnah. Just say Quran and Sunnah, quote a few verses, quote a hadith, and that's it. You on it, Ak. Not realizing that most of the stuff you talking about has nothing to do with the Quran or the Sunnah. It's some man's opinion, right? So I'm starting off my discussion there. And that ain't directed to one person. That's the condition that the enemies of our people have been playing on us for hundreds of years, right? So let me start with that, because this subject, until we clarify it, it's always going to cause problems in our communities. So I went and got this book. It was written by one of the great scholars of Yemen. He died exactly 60 years after Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. As you know, that I am very attached to the way of As-Sada al-Ba'alawi, which is the family of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in Hadramaut, Yemen. And these people from the 8th century, they didn't have weapons, right? They refused to fight. Spiritual people, Sufis, don't have a bad thing to say about nobody. I want you to think about this. And if you ever been around like regular people who follow that way, they're the furthest away from conflict, right? But one of their great Imams, he's not from the family of the Prophet. He's like the Salman of the Ba'alawis. His name is Sheikh Abdullah bin Ahmed Ba Saudan. He wrote this book. It's a manuscript, so it's not like published. It's called Faydul Asrar, right? And this book, I had it made, so it's like it's a manuscript. He was talking about having a good opinion of those who believe and have a conviction in the sanctity and the piety of the awliya. Especially, he's mentioning that that's the people who have the awliya. You're supposed to have that for Muslims in general, but especially the awliya of Allah. Then he said something that really struck me. He died 1266. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab died in 1206 AH, right? So after talking about having a good opinion, he said, especially what has spread and became numerous in this time, the time he's living, among the evil practices of the rebellious devil, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his group. Listen, they don't have that kind of speech. What was going on to make somebody like that, spiritual people, to call Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab and his people rebellious devils? That's deep. Think about their evil deeds. That's how he described them. He said, Huwa wa ibn Saud wa ghayruhum. Him, Muhammad ibn Saud, and the rest of them, all of them. That's how he described them. Think about that. Now, this is like super Sufi guy, right? They don't fight. They don't have weapons. For 500 years, they weren't, from the time of Faqih al-Muqaddam, no weapons. He broke the sword. That's how he's talking. He said, from among the people of bigotry to asub, fanaticism about your group, and hardness, harsh hearts. That's how he described them. He said about the common people, this is what they feel about the common people who have a conviction in the awliya and visit them and turn to Allah and ask Allah by their status, seeking their intercession. And that they have karamat, all those things. That all of this is shirk al-akbar, major shirk. And they fight those Muslims as they're fighting Christians and Jews. It's nice sitting in your comfortable chair and you don't see what they did. But these are people who lived it, who watched them come to their lands and pillage the land. Muslims, these are not non-Muslims. These are people who pray 5 times a day, recite the Quran, memorize the Quran, do dhikr, and they came and slaughtered them. Men, women, babies. So you talking about like, nah, they witnessed this stuff. To the point that one of their great scholars said, if Al-Faqih Al-Muqaddam was alive today, he would mend his sword. Wow. Imagine, like, put your mind there. This man broke his sword like no fighting. He said if he was alive to see these people, he would mend his sword. That's something to think about. And if you read their books and study their history, they considered all Muslims except them as mushrikun, kuburiyun, grave worshippers, who deserve to be executed and their property taken. And that's what they did to Muslims based on the teachings of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. He's saying that at the same time, when you have the great scholars of the nation in Mecca, in Medina, in Egypt, in Sham, when you study Asanid, chains of narration, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab died in the year 1206. Write that down. Just so you remember, I told you globally and historically studying the deen. Who among the great scholars of hadith and fiqh in Arabic language died just 1 year before him, lived in the same exact time, and was the foremost scholar in his time for conveying the chains of narration of the religion? Who was that? And he was in the center of Islamic knowledge at that time. Not Imam al-Haddad. You gotta know your dates. Come on. No one has an excuse not to know this. That means we're studying. Remember we talked about that 50% this morning? Come on. You're killing us here. Who is that? It's easy to know. If you've been a Zabidi, right, Malika? The women win. Yeah, hey, come on, clap it up for the women, bro. You got to give the sister some stuff. Right? What's his whole name, Malika? This is important what I'm talking about, because I be telling us when we be talking about studying, you dealing with people who's falsifying stuff. So we got to have our facts. We got to know what we're talking about. Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi. He said, Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi, he died in the year 1205. He was the sheikh of the sheikh of the shehu. So the shehu, Sheikh Uthman Danfoudi, his sheikh was Sheikh Jibril bin Umar. And the sheikh of Jibril bin Umar was Al-Hafiz Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi. He lived in the same time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab. And he was in Egypt, in Al-Azhar. And all of the scholars around the earth were coming to him to take chains of narration. He said, there is no book or no scholar on the face of the earth except I have an unbroken chain to him. And anyone who studies hadith, since they are the people of hadith, and chains of narration, their narrations at one point are going to go to the Hafiz Muhammad Murtada az-Zabidi, the famous commentator on the Ihya Ulumuddin and on Al-Qamus, in his famous book Taj al-Arus, the commentary on Al-Qamus, one of the most famous dictionaries in Arabic. He was the seal of the Arabic linguist. They said no one came after him that reached his level of knowledge in the Arabic language. These are all important points. Just put context. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab was at the same time with men like that. And before them, the great muhaddith and musnid of Mecca, Sheikh Abdullah bin Salam al-Basri, was right before them, the generation before them. He was at the same time of Imam al-Haddad. Sufis, Asharis, Shafi'is, Sufis, Maturidis, Hanafis, Malikis, Asharis, Sufis. That was the environment. All of them had the belief in the awliya and the conviction and making a tawassul by them and seeking and calling Allah by the status of the awliya. That was their habit. And he said all of them are kuffar. All of them are mushrikun. All of them worship graves. And he wasn't close to none of them in status, in knowledge, hadith, fiqh, belief, Arabic language, you name it, he wasn't nowhere near none of them. And he became Shaykh al-Islam, according to him and his followers. And the other Muslims, that's how they looked at him. That's something to think about. These are people who lived there, who watched what was happening. And they were the greatest scholars that this nation has known. That's how they viewed them. So that wasn't just his own brother, as Imam Naim said, and the Hanabila around him. This dude he was the ISIS, the Boko Haram, the Khawarij of his time, of his era. That's a fact. And he killed Muslims, not non-Muslims. He didn't have no jihad against non-Muslims. He had jihad against Muslims whom he made kafir. Now, someone will ask, how do we benefit? Don't this sound familiar? Does this sound familiar? And ISIS, their main book in Tawheed is his book, Kitabu Tawheed. And all those who follow that doctrine, their main book in Tawheed is Kitabu Tawheed. Let's critically think about this. Yet, none of the other scholars read that book, Kitabu Tawheed. That wasn't even considered a book to learn in Aqidah. Like, no one was learning that stuff. Nowhere in the world. That was his group. And when you study the historic side of it, why you think the Saudis, they don't never go against America or against the West? It was the West who helped their grandfather, who gave them, and their grandfathers who gave them Saudi Arabia, like they gave the Jews Palestine. Those Zionists was given Palestine. They gave them Arabia. Listen, homie, as we say, this is facts. You don't gotta make it listen to me. Go study. Go read. Go read their books. Forget somebody else. Read his books. Most of these guys talking, they never studied the books. They just went and got indoctrinated. They never really examined really what was being said. And that's why I asked for this conversation with Yasser Qadhi. Not to criticize him, because he was the poster child for them. Let's be real honest. You know more than anyone else. You actually know. You can tell the truth. But if you tell the truth, you're going to have to really spit out all your stuff. And sometimes we don't want to do that. Right? But now here, check this out. So they changed the name Salafi. So everyone in the world study. Nowhere in the world, in the time of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, in the time of his son, Hassan, in the time of his grandson, Abdul Rahman, and those who came after them, Abdul Latif and Ibrahim and Muhammad bin Ibrahim and that whole Ali Sheikh family, go around the world and study at each time how the Muslims around the world looked at them. This is a fact. This is not something we making up. This is, you can study. We should love history. We should love to study. This is a fact. Now, they changed the name to Salafi. Okay. Don't say Wahhabi since it makes you mad. Say Salafi. What do the Salafis study? I want to ask if there are Salafis here. Let's not, so I'm not going to get political. Oh, don't say Salafi, say Wahhabi. Forget it. That's whatever you want to call yourself. As Imam Naim said, because it ain't about you as an individual. Any Salafis, give me the main 3 books that the first person, if they join the Salafi movement, what are the first 3 books they should learn? By the scholars of the Salafis. What books they tell you to learn? Tell me, I'm listening. All y'all been Salafis before or had it. What are the first 3 books they tell you to learn? No, we're not, don't say Wahhabi. Say Salafi. What are the first 3 books they tell you to learn?
Kitab al-Tawheed.
Kitab al-Tawheed.
Usul al-Thalatha.
Or Thalathatul Usul. Al-Usul al-Thalatha, right? Go ahead. The 3 principles. And
I think they Usul Sunnah or something.
No. That's not the first 3 books. So you got 2. Rabia would get on you, Ak. You wasn't listening. That's why he threw you off the minhaj.
Yeah, that's okay.
He's bid'ah.
Yeah.
And if you don't consider him a mubtadi', you are a mubtadi'. Right? Right? No, Aqid al-Wasatiyya comes later. That's more advanced. What's the next book after those 3? Those 2? Where is all these? Say alhamdulillah, we're not Wahhabi. That's good. That's a good sign. Or are y'all quiet now because he got you? No, Qawaid al-Arba'a, that's not one of the 3. That comes later too. There are 3 main books. They're the first things you should study in their doctrine. Now everybody's quiet when it comes to their Wahhabism, right? Kashfu Shubahat. Kashfu Shubahat. That's the 3rd book. Then those other books, but then they go to Al-Aqid al-Wasatiyya. You don't start with Al-Aqid al-Wasatiyya, right? Right? You don't start there. You start all 3 of those books, Kitab al-Tawheed, Thalathatul Usul, or you can say Al-Usul al-Thalatha, right? Kashfu Shubahat. All of those books are written by who? They're written by who?
At-Tamimi.
At-Tamimi. Who are they written by? Come on, let's keep it clean.
The Najdi Sheikh. MIAW.
Muawiyah, should I listen to you or Sheikh Rabi'? Who should I take? Imam Faheem, whose opinion I'm going to take? Muawiyah's or Sheikh Rabi' al-Madkhali?
Rabi'!
So you sit down, I'm not listening to you. Rabi'a said, or else, our father.
Our father in Minhaj has spoken.
Al-Walid said. So I don't care what you're talking about, young boy. Sit down, right? We have fun too, right? But no, seriously. All of them written by Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. So whether, and anyone, when they said Wahhabi, they were referring to those books that led to those ideas. So no matter what you call yourself, it's the same idea. Right or wrong. No matter what you call yourself, the same books. Now be honest, go in your libraries and see what books you have. Right? Go in your libraries, for you've been studying them, and see what books you got. This is real stuff. So it's not the one's attacking you. That's true. Don't tell me the truth. Please, no, don't say it. No, tell you the truth. Now, those are the same books that the people was reading and studying, and you need to memorize them because this is the da'wah. And what do they call their leaders that follow those books and teach those books? A'immatul da'wah, the imams of the da'wah. And before this da'wah came, everybody else was astray. The whole Muslim nation astray until you came.
The Kibarul Ulama.
Listen, he was born 1115. All the Muslims were astray. Mushrikun. Right? And now, when you study, and this is just facts, right? When you study, that's what's in our community. When they go to the bookstore, that's what's looking them in the face. The same thing that produced this statement from Sheikh Abdullah bin Ahmed Basaudan. Man, that's deep. That's what's in our communities that made this pious, scholarly man who nobody in his sheikhs and the family of us, they don't do nothing, have nothing to do with no fighting, nothing to do about arguing, nothing to do. And he said this rebellious devil, him and his people, came to kill us and fight us like we Christians and Jews. Think about that. These are Muslims. Our whole generation back to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, family of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like scholars, not just family, but in blood and knowledge and piety from generation to generation to generation to generation. And you telling us we all kuffar and idol worshippers and grave worshippers. And your people don't even have no knowledge. We're the bearers of Mecca and Medina. Now here's the catch. They were the scholars of Mecca and Medina before he came. They were the ones who he was directly referring to. They were the scholars of Mecca and Medina. So now, historically study before the end of the 12th century Hijrah, go check the imams and the scholars, the main scholars of Mecca and Medina, and study their biographies. And you will see they were all as Ash'aris, Maturidis, Malikis, Shafi'is, Hanafis, Hanbalis, all of them Sufis. And they all had these practices all around the Muslim world. And this guy comes out of Najd, out of Eastern Arabia with his group and considers all of them kuffar. You don't learn from that? And these are the same people who are in all of our masjids. And when they go to Medina, the University of Medina, this is what they're studying. They're actually studying this stuff. That's why they come back and say, your parents is bid'ah, idol worshippers, kuffar, everything is mushrikun, shirk. Your people know more about shirk than they know about tawheed. Right? Like, that's what they put, because they train the people they send back. And them people don't tell you what they heard. Go study the top sheikhs that these people learn from. They all Wahhabi. They all love Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab in his books. So how could a man in one light be Sheikh al-Islam and to the other people, a rebellious devil? Something ain't right here. Think about that. I want you to just let's do critical thinking. Only his followers, which means his family and his political supporters from the family of Saud, they're the ones who established those schools. That's true. It's not like we making it up. It's true. But that's in our communities. Then you wonder why we can't get along. It ain't because we Ash'ari or Maturidi. It's because these people don't even consider the others as Muslim. They just don't tell you that because it's not politically correct. Right? It's not politically correct. They're not telling you. And now, when you talk about the three Tawheeds, I'm going to tell you why. It is directly what he's talking about here. So I'm going to stop. I'm just, because I was thinking about this. I was like, man, as Imam, I told you, drift me for a minute. And I'm not speaking like just talking. I'm a researcher. So I can just be quiet and go like this. Book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, book 100. Here's the statements. I just mark. That's all I do. I sit around and read books and mark and research. So don't make it about me. I'm the dummy that don't know nothing. Here's your scholars. Here's what they said. How do you feel about that? Here's their words. You studied with them. Here's their Arabic words. That's what they said. That's what they wrote. Forget them shiny pamphlets you put in the store. That stuff is so watered down for public consumption. Now, I want to know what y'all really said. I want to know what your teachers actually said. The ones who taught you. The one you was sitting in a circle in the Prophet's mosque and in the university and in his house. What was he saying? And they were Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. But now, those same people who carry that doctrine, it's fine so long as you're putting it on somebody else. Don't bring that against the rulers. No. Because the rulers is our family. You can't go against the rulers. But everyone else, it works for them. But for us, even if we got women walking around this land that you had to purify from kufr and shirk, and you got real mushriks in there now partying and throwing concerts, but no fighting for them, only for Muslims. Only for Muslims. And you ask me, what do we benefit from this? Maybe we would wake up and learn our religion properly. Maybe that would be a great benefit. If someone told you that they know different than the Israelis if they was in charge. At least the Israelis are known non-Muslims, right? So we can understand. Now, these people claim to be Muslim, and they would slaughter us if they had power. But the world is different. You can't do that Muhammad ibn Wahhab stuff. But it's in your books. It's in your lectures. It's in your tapes. It's in your recordings. Yes. But just most of us don't have access, so we don't know what's really being said. And that's why they throw people off the minhaj so easily. Go against that hardcore line and see what happened to you. Go against that hardcore Wahhabi line. Call yourself whatever you want. Go against it. That's true. Now, how does that impact us as a people and others? But especially we weren't dealing with it. Now you know why we can't pray together. We can't have no group. All your elders are mushriks and it's ignorant and off the path, ain't on Quran and Sunnah. Now you know why that stuff is happening? They got it from them. It has a root. I'll stop there if you got the point. Because for me, let's document this stuff. Let's show this stuff. And then we can also from the Quran and Sunnah, because the people of Quran and Sunnah have their evidences for everything you call in shirk. From the Quran and Sunnah, from the practice of the Muslims. The stuff you call in shirk and grave worshipping, and the reason why we people of bid'ah, and you have no contact with the people of bid'ah. Don't even listen to them. You know what Rabi al-Madkhali said? I was like, this is dangerous to tell a black man. He said, it is better to you to die ignorant than to learn from the people of innovation. And he mean people who claim they Muslim. Like, dang, you can't tell a black person that. Seriously. It's better you die in a state of jahl, ignorance, than to go learn. So they ain't listening to you about nothing. If the father said that, think about that. Don't learn. You just don't learn, and may Allah overlook you. What the heck did you just say? You can't tell us that. Yeah, that's what they say. Y'all know me. I'm facts. Here's the books, right? That's my thing. Maybe I don't read. You read it. Tell me what that says. Explain that to me. But know what happens? They gave us a bunch of pamphlets, so we never even read their stuff. We won't learn. We'll just read the little shiny pamphlets in Dar es Salaam store, or on Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, or on, where's the Philly? Market Street, Chestnut Street.
52nd and Chestnut.
Yeah. You're going to be in there reading all that nonsense. But the real books, they're not showing you. Volumes of this nonsense.
Yeah, go to the
Qadiani
store, the Islamic place, to get your Wahhabi books.
Naam, go ahead. And I'll come back with the 3 Tawheeds if we have time, or next week.
Alhamdulillah. So I'm going to be very brief. I just want to really highlight, why we talking about it from this angle. Look at it like the Shahada. You have a negation and you have an affirmation. You have La ilaha, then you have illallah. There is no God except Allah. So you have to know that the rule is that there is no God, and the exception is that Allah, right? So you're negating something first, you're cleaning everything out, and then you're affirming something. So now we're in this situation, right? And our environment is polluted. And polluted, I'm not trying to be inflammatory, I'm being factual, is polluted with Wahhabism, right? And so we so deep into this stuff that we don't even know we in it. We think it's supposed to be like this. I always give you the example of, one of those stereotypical gamers, the dude that's living in his mother's basement. He's a grown up, right? Windows, ain't no windows open. It's all musty. He don't remember the last time he took a shower, right? All these old pizza boxes and, energy drink cans all around, stuff getting moldy. You, his friend, you come down there. Hey, Miss Smith, is Johnny around? Yeah, you know where he at in the basement playing them games. So you go down there, you open the door like, yo, man, it's stinking here, man. What is this? I don't smell nothing, right? Like, yo, man, when's the last time you washed up? Nah, I don't know. Maybe yesterday or something, right? Yo, it stink, man. You need to take a shower and let's go out, man. Get some fresh air. He don't smell it because he's in it, right? This is our environment. It literally stinks of Wahhabi pollution in our creed in the United States of America, the average Muslim. We think this stuff is normal. What are you talking about? That's Islam, right? And we refuse to go out like that stereotypical gamer and look around the world, like Imam Amin always talks about, globally and historically. We don't even like to do history. The things we think of, the things that we think are Islam didn't even exist in a codified way, the way we look at it now, 400 years ago, 300 years ago. All of this stuff is new. And we think this is normative Islam. So I just want to mention some hallmarks of this idea, this new creed, this new reformed, rebranded, new version of Islam. We mentioned the 3 Tawheeds, and Imam Amin, either this week, either today or maybe next week, he'll break down how and why they exist. And they exist like that for a reason. And we kind of like scratch the surface, but there's a reason why they made 3 Tawheeds and why they break it down like that. Right? A lot of them are anti-madhab. So in our day and age, not the only ones, but in our day and age, if you have the idea in your head, I don't follow no madhab, I just follow the Quran and Sunnah. You may or may not know it, but if that's the way you think, that's who you got it from, the Wahhabis. Now, don't be confused. A lot of them are on that page. They just follow Quran and Sunnah, as if you have the ability to extract rulings from the Quran and Sunnah yourself as an individual. The reality is the common Muslim doesn't. The common Muslim has to depend on someone. And in Islam, we call that mujtahid scholar, like the highest level of scholars. Like, for example, the 4 Imams and their students, and all of them up into our day. But the Wahhabi idea, and like I said, I know there are other groups, I just don't want to mention them right now. I don't want to make you more confused. But the Wahhabis weren't the only ones that had this idea of Quran and Sunnah. Actually, somebody beat them to that punch. And maybe I will mention it in a second. But a lot of them, many of them, maybe most of them, have this idea that we don't follow no madhabs, we just Quran and Sunnah. But don't get confused, because some of them say that they follow madhabs now. I'm trying to give y'all hallmarks so y'all won't get confused. I don't want you to be like, oh, this one says he's Maliki, or this one says he's Hanbali, or this one says he's Shafi'i. So they can't be Wahhabis because they follow madhabs. Nah, don't let them rock you to sleep like that. Remember, we told you what makes them Wahhabi is their unique belief system. And we gave you certain characteristics of it. So a lot of them now claim to follow a madhab. But the secret is in the creed, the Aqidah. A lot of them still have Wahhabi Aqidah. But some of them try to play a game with that too. Some of them say we're Athari, meaning we follow the creed of Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But many of them, if you zoom in on it, That's game. Or as the young people say, that's cap. They really still have the creed of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab. They just running game. So, but a lot of them, no method. And if you may be watching this, you know I'm not with that stuff. I'm just Muslim, man. I ain't no Salafi, Wahhabi. I ain't with that stuff, man. What method you follow? I don't follow no method. Quran and Sunnah. You Wahhabi influence. You just don't know it. Another hallmark, right, is they're against Sufis or Sufism. Sufi is English of Tasawwuf or a practitioner of Tasawwuf. By definition, all Muslims want to be Sufi. We don't claim to be Sufi, but we want to be Sufi, right? So if you or someone else say, is he Sufi or is she Sufi or are they Sufi? Just by you asking the question like that, that automatically implies that you think a Sufi is something bad, which means that you got that from the Wahhabis. Even though I'm just Muslim, Quran and Sunnah, or, I just want to know if he's Sufi. Okay, well, what's a Sufi? And usually, if someone asks the question, is he or she a Sufi? And then you respond by saying, what is a Sufi? Then you get the hesitation. Then you get the hemming and hawing. And if they're really sincere and they give you an answer, they're going to tell you Sufi is something bad. They may tell you about some whirling dervishes, or they may tell you this, or tell you that, no, they worship the graves or something like that. And when you get an answer like that, once again, that's come from Wahhabism. Even though the one who's saying it may not think that they are Salafi or Wahhabi or anything. Their influence, their thinking, their opinion of what they think a Sufi is coming from the Wahhabis. That stuff is prevalent here. Tell you a story. Y'all remember when we was at 52nd Street, when we had the Masjid, and when we was in Philly? You know, that's the hot spot, all them vendors there. I don't even know if they still got them there. All the vendors is there. Cats used to come to the Masjid looking around because I heard some Sufis was running the Masjid. They was come and the grave worshipers, and they come in looking for a grave. Now, if y'all not from Philly, it was a storefront Masjid. The first floor was a PNC bank, and the second and the third floor was the Masjid, right? So people are coming in the Masjid looking for a grave. Where do they think we had the grave at? Under the bank? On top of the roof? On the fire escape? Where was the grave at that we was worshiping? But this is how messed up in their mind they are. They Sufis, right? And they worship grave. I know they got a grave up in here, right? And there was a rumor going around that we really had a grave up there. And so they was looking for the grave. Where the grave at? Where the grave at, right? Because in their minds, Ahlul Sunnah, they Sufis, that means they're grave worshipers. And so I know they got a grave in here somewhere. And they literally came in there looking for graves. I'm not exaggerating. So the negative idea about Sufis, or if they want to make you having a bad opinion about someone, they say, oh, he's a Sufi. So even if you don't identify yourself as a Salafi or Wahhabi or anything remotely connected to them, if you have that bad idea in your head, even if you don't know where the idea came from, I'm telling you, it's coming from the Wahhabis. You've been influenced by the Wahhabis. So that's another one of their hallmarks. And they just began calling themselves Salafi in the mid-1990s. A lot of y'all don't know that. They just began calling themselves Salafis from the mid-1990s. Now, does anyone know where or who got the idea to call them Salafis? Any of y'all know? Ooh, Abdurrahim. Ooh, yes, Albani. It was his idea. Do y'all know where he got it from? Do y'all know where he got the idea from? Yeah. Imam Faheem?
No, the brother on YouTube answered it, I think. You see it?
Yeah, he's close. He right there. He might as well say he's correct. Muhammad Abdul, his man, his mentor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had like this little trio thing going on. Muhammad Abdul, Rashid Ridda, and Jamal Afghani. In order, right? Jamal Afghani is like the elder, Muhammad Abdul, right? And then Rashid Ridda. A lot of their biographies and stuff and whatever, he cleaned up a lot of their dirt. These is like some Freemason weird dudes that really set up shop really in Egypt, right? But specifically Muhammad Abdul, he had this idea of, you know what, every Muslim has the right to extract directly from the Quran and the Sunnah. And, you know, everybody can do ijtihad. He had a lot of wild ideas. But he called his idea and his thought thing Salafiyya. Salafiyya. Now, if you listen to the Wahhabis don't like these guys either. See, a lot of y'all get confused. Y'all don't want to just think stuff through. So y'all think, well, if they don't like you, so they must be with us. No, it don't work like that, right? So if you ask a Wahhabi about these three guys, they don't have anything good to say about them either. But Al-Albani got the idea of calling their dawah, their minhaj, their methodology, the Salafi dawah from them, Muhammad Abdul. They used to have a newsletter that they wrote called Al-Urat al-Wuthqa, right? And so that's where he got the idea from. You know who speaks about that too, ironically? Who mentioned that? Dr. Yasir Qadhi. He mentioned it. That they're rebranding themselves as Salafi came from Al-Albani, who got it from Muhammad Abdul. So I'll just close on that. I just wanted to mention some highlights because you're learning, you know, what to look out for, what are some of their hallmarks. I'm hoping that you're learning that while at the same time you're learning the proper creed. So that's the affirmation. So you're learning what to look out for. You learn some of the red flags that we've given you. And I hope this is not it, right? You're in some classes, our classes, other classes of reputable people from Ahlul Sunnah, and you're learning a proper belief system. So, alhamdulillah, that's all I have.
Okay, before Imam Amin goes on to close us, I just want to remind us, we almost at the goal. I think we're really close. So if you haven't made the, your contribution, inshallah, please do so. Help us to reach our goal. So my next thing I'm saying, it'll be very brief. But if I may, I want to share a couple of books that I think you guys should read, because outside of the doctrine, alhamdulillah, we have many teachers teaching Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah. We have Imam Amin, that's a specialty, and Hadith is a specialty. But we have to start looking at the stuff outside of some of these things to really get the proper history, and just to give you a glimpse of how deep the rabbit hole goes. So this is the first book. It's called The Making of Salafism. The Making of Salafism, Islamic Reform in the 20th Century. And so in this book, they start talking about what Imam Naeem mentioned, that even how the Salafi movement transformed into a reform movement that even broke off from the Wahhabi movement. And then you see in these movements nowadays, they have a whole bunch of groups where they disagree with each other. And there's another book that just came to mind. they have a book that's called it's called The Counterfeit Salafis, right? So within the Salafi movement, they have a whole bunch of subgroups, and all of them are identified by who they follow, and each one of them have a problem with each other. So there is no really consensus on what Salafiyya is, you know, because they got the jihadi Salafists, they got the intellectual Salafists, they got the bootlicking Salafists, they got the all of these, you know. So even in their own movement, they have all of these splinter groups, and that's the sign of a splinter group, that they produce another splinter group, you know. So that's one book I think you should read, because it mentions how these characters that Imam Naim mentioned, that's really their isnad. Because if you read in the bio of Al-Albani, he said how he got interested in hadith is he read the magazine called Al-Manar. Al-Manar magazine was written by Rashid Rida, you know, who was an influence in early Salafi reform movement. That's where he got his thing. So his idea of looking at books and criticizing scholars that came before and verifying stuff on his own. So you make those connections. Who else verifies stuff on their own? Ibn Abdul Wahhab. And Al-Albani picked up this trait from these reformers. And then now what happens? Doing his own research on his own without any precedents, without any teachers, he criticized the Saudi government. And when Ben Baz invited him there to teach there, when Medina first opened, when he criticized the government, they kicked him out. You might not have heard of that, you know, but he got kicked out because he said something against the family. And so the Saudi family, if you remember, not too long ago, who was they dropping bombs on? Syria and Yemen, Muslims, because of a perceived notion that their kingdom was under attack. And now when Muslims need the help in Philistine, where are these bombs that they should be dropping on the aggressors? But that's another topic for another day. Here's another book that I think you should read. This is very important. It's called The Call. It's called The Call Inside the Global Saudi Religious Project. The Call Inside the Global Religious, I'm typing this bad, Religious Saudi Project. I'm not spelling it there. Religious Saudi Project. All right. And in this book, right, there's an excerpt in where they was talking about King Fahd, right? You know, King Fahd had one of the longest runs of all of those kings in Saudi, right? And here it says that on he got a legacy website. It said in the 3 decades of his reign from 1982 to 2005, the kingdom spent $4 billion Saudi riyals, or over $1 billion, on mosques, schools, preachers and teachers' salaries, scholarships, and textbooks throughout the world. And then there's another part that says, if you wanted to get Saudi funding that goes to the royal family, that's not even checked. So they get a free money that's not even, they don't even have to account for. And so they give it to these organizations and schools and these students of knowledge if they may apply for it. And so when they give them money, they give them the curriculum and they tell them what to say and what to teach and what to promote. And this is why a lot of these people are quiet on some of these issues, because they're being paid. They're giving hush money. And so one critic of the Saudi government, he said the petrodollar, he said it went righteous. So they took this money and did a global assault on the world and hitting their propaganda of their Wahhabi doctrine that they promoted. And so, you know, we still up against this. So this happened over like a 50-year span. Over a 50-year span, they started doing this. And then we're still seeing the effects of it, because you can go in the store, especially in the era we're in, and you see all these glossy books, but they all talk about the same concepts. They all talk about the same concepts because they don't have anything new. Bid'ah, shirk, you know, tawheed, pure tawheed, and what opposes it, nullifiers of Islam, all of the same concepts in their books, right? And then the other book you should read is called let me get the name of it. Maybe I'm taking too long to type because I know Imam Amin is ready. He on go. He ready. I put an excerpt of the book earlier. It's called Wahhabism, the history of a militant Islamic movement. Wahhabism, the history of a militant Islamic movement. Should I type that in there? If you go through the notes, you'll see it. But in this book, it's talking about how the movement started, as Imam Amin was alluding to, on violence against Muslims. And this was one of the traits of the Khawarij. That is, the Prophet ﷺ said about them, that they will leave alone the polytheists and they will kill the Muslims. And so you look at the history of Ibn Abdul Wahhab, not once in his almost 50 years of being in war did he fight against disbelievers. He fought against Muslims that he made into mushriks on his own thinking, not without any precedence. He didn't consult the ulama, he didn't consult the mufti, he didn't call the judges. He took matters in his own hands, like what they call those people. What they call those people? Like Bernard Getz type of people. Y'all remember Bernard Getz, the dude on the train? What they call those people that take the law? Vigilantes. He was a vigilante, and it's the truth, and that can't be denied. And under that, glossed over history that they put is the dark side of this movement that they don't want to discuss, and they call it lies and they call it propaganda, but it can't be denied. And so you should read this book about Wahhabism, the start of an Islamic movement, a militant Islamic movement, and to discuss that many of the scholars in there who refuted and opposed them and called them out. And there was one scholar, because he said that Ibn Abdul Wahhab claimed ijtihad in what he did, and calling the Muslims mushriks. He challenged them, said, if you are mujtahid, then it should be no problem to write a 10-volume work on your position. And he refused it because he didn't have it. And even if you look at all those books, the scholars that criticized him said that these are like pamphlets that he wrote. Any of the books that you read in the Wahhabi movement, Kitab al-Tawheed, Qawaid al-Arba'ah, and all of those books, they're like pamphlets. They're not scholarly works. Compared to real scholarly works, scholars always wrote in volumes. He doesn't have any work that's written in volumes. And how is he a mujtahid then? So, and it's that's the other thing. And that's another one I didn't write, but this one, I try to read this book every year. It's called The Broken Chain by brother Aftab Malik, and I think Imam Zayd Shakir collaborated with him on the book. He's supposed to be doing a reprint of it. It's called The Broken Chain, The Neglect of a Tradition. You got to read this book because it brings the history of what Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah is, what it means to Sanad, and how they are broken off from that chain. And this is why they have the problems, So I'll stop there, inshallah, and I'll leave the rest for Imam Amin. Don't forget, drop that bread.
Unfortunately, we ran out of time. But
oh, my bad, Imam.
Because what I would like to give is a long, it's long to read all of it. But I want to remove from us people just telling us anything. So I mentioned earlier what those Salafis, so-called Salafis, whom we call Wahhabis, the books they use. So this was a question, and here's the book, right, that I'm reading this from. This is a compendium of books, letters, and fatwas of Rabi' ibn Hadi ibn Umair al-Madkhali, right? Volume number 15. right? He was the head of the department in the Sunnah in University Medina. All of these guys you see, they are students of his or students of his students. He was the man until he threw them all off the minhaj. Now they don't like him. They used to call him father, as we say in our language, daddy. Right? Look what he was asked. Is the section. It's on page number 60. And it's multiple questions like this. He was asked, and this is about al-manhajiyatu fi talab al-ilm, the methodology in seeking knowledge. He was asked the question, which was, "Ya Sheikh, what is the path to seek beneficial knowledge?" And then the second question, he put them together. "Ya Sheikh, I love you for the sake of Allah, and I ask Allah to gather us with you in the abode of paradise. I want to know, inshallah, I want to be, inshallah, a Salafi scholar who defends a Salafiyya to the last drop of my blood. In which way do you direct me?" This is the question. So after answering, he says, he just, open it up. And then he says, "I advise the students of knowledge, right, to pay close attention to the Quran in terms of memorizing, studying, and understanding, and to the Sunnah of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and to start with al-aqaid. Start with the beliefs, the creed, by the minhaj that was chosen by a'immatul da'wah." Remember I said the imams of the da'wah? It's Al-Albani mentioning it right there. A'immatul da'wah. They are the children of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab. They're the imams of the da'wah. He says, so you begin in Aqidah, in Tawheed of Ibadah, the Tawheed of worship, with Kitabu Tawheed, or Al-Usul al-Thalatha, the three principles, or Kashfu Shubahat. And the most general and the best in organizing and the most exalted is Kitab Tawheed, the book of Tawheed, which is rare to find a book that is written like it in the area of Tawheed. Right there. So you can screenshot it, so he's translating, you can read it yourself, right? Those three books, that's what they start with. He was the head teacher in the direction of, in the section of the Sunnah in Al-Madinah University. All of them go to visit his house. All of them that come here, this is his advice. These are the books that you should study. And then he goes on, he gives a whole manhaj and methodology of studying. Then, after you study that, go to the commentaries of Fathul Kitab al-Tawheed, Fathul Mujid, and Taysir al-Aziz al-Hamid, and Quratul Uyun al-Muwahideen. All of these books written by the children, grandson of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab, Abdul Rahman ibn Hassan ibn Abdul Wahab. All Wahhabi books written by the children of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahab. And everything similar to that. Then he says, when you want to learn the Tawheed of Asma wa Sifat, start with the books of whom he calls Shaykh al-Islam, Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Wasitiyah, Al-Hamawiyah, and Tadmuriyah. All books. And then the commentary on the Tahawi by Ibn Abi Is, the student of Ibn Taymiyyah. This is when you want to be a Salafi sheikh. If you want to be an alim Salafi, what you need to do, study the books of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Now, for those people who say, oh, it's blameworthy to call Wahhabi, this is Al-Hawi min Fatawa Sheikh Al-Albani. This is fatwas of Al-Albani. Section. This is their books. I didn't make them up. Section. Al-Wahhabiyya. You see it? He's asked about it. They asked him, what is ma ra'yukum bil Wahhabiyya? What's your opinion of the Wahhabiyya? It's long, 3 pages. So I'm going to summarize for you because we're out of time. He said, Al-Wahhabiyya is a name among names. And there's no one in the dunya, no group that call themselves Wahhabiyya. That's what he said, Wahhabiyun, right? He said, rather it's their enemies and their disputants who give them that name. As for the Muslims, among the Muslims, and you know who they think is Muslims, only them, right? Among the Muslims, there's no trace of this word among them. You will not find, he said, because there doesn't exist a group that says, Nahnu Wahhabiyun, we are Wahhabis. Rather, there are millions of Muslims today who call themselves Salafiyun. Salafiyun. Now look what he said. There is no harm, wala haraj, alayhim. There will be no problem, no harm on them if they consider themselves as they were Wahhabiyun. He said there is nothing wrong if they use the terminology Yakuluna ala anfusihim Wahhabiyun. If they said we are Wahhabis. Why? Because as the people of knowledge says, there's no consideration in terminology. What is intended by that is what is important. Right? So Al-Albani himself said, there's nothing wrong if they said they were Wahhabis. Because they're Salafis. But if they call themselves Wahhabi, it is good. It's okay. Nothing wrong with it. Now, if Al-Albani says there's nothing wrong with saying Wahhabi, and if they uses a terminology to say Salafi, why you got a problem with it? Al-Albani said there's no problem with it. We don't pay attention to terminology. And wait a minute. Then he goes on quickly. I'm trying to summarize, it's long. He said, but in reality, there is no group in the world that call themselves Wahhabis, Wahhabiyun. He said, there are people who say they're Hanafi or Shafi'i or Hanbali or Maliki or Shia or Zaidi or Alawi or Salafi, but there are not people who say about themselves they're Wahhabi. He said, so ask these sheikhs who call the Hanabilas of Najd Wahhabis. They call the Hanabila of Najd Wahhabis. This is Al-Albani. He know they call them Wahhabis, not Amin and Faheem and Naim. Al-Albani said the sheikhs in that time, they called them Wahhabis, the Hanabila of Najd, the followers of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. Then he goes on. He said, and they say about the Salafis, وَأَنْ سَلَفِيِّينَ فِي السُّورِيَّةِ أَنَّهُمْ وَهَابِيِّينَ. He say about the Salafis in Syria, they Wahhabis. It's not us. This is Al-Albani. Muhaddith al-Asr. He's identifying who's calling them Wahhabis. Right? He said, where did they come with these words? This is calling names, right? He said, and this is what the Quran forbids. As for what is the Wahhabi and what is the story the history of the Wahhabis and why are they called Wahhabis? Now he's talking about it. I mean, it's there, right there. You got a picture. You could just, I'll leave it there so you can see it yourself, right? He said, why are they called Wahhabis? Then he goes, again, there's no group that calls themselves Wahhabi. And they don't have a story. But this, for purpose of argumentation, right? I'm going to answer this question for the purpose of argumentation, for argument's sake, as we say, right? As for the reality, there is a group of people in Najd, in Hijaz. Hijaz is Mecca and Medina, the western part of Arabia. Najd is the eastern part of Arabia. Man, I wish we had more time. I would like to read this whole thing.
We're gonna do it for next week, right?
Yeah, we'll do something. But listen, he says, so there is a group of, this is the reality. He said, أما الحقيقة هناك ناسا في نجد والحجاز. Right? There are people in Najd, Eastern Arabia, and Hijaz. They are known as Hanbali, Hanabila, from the side of a madhab. And then these Hanabila in Najd are distinguished from other Hanabilas outside of Najd, right? They're different. He says that. They're different. They're not the same. He said, فَإِنْدَنَا فِي السُّورِيَّةِ Hanabila. He's from Syria. Al-Albani grew up in Syria. He said, in Syria, we have Hanabila. And in Damascus, the Mufti of the Hanbalis, right? He's the Mufti. He's from the Hanabila, right? And they're in some eastern villages. There are Hanabilas. They differ from the Hanbalis in Najd, right? Even though they have the same name. But they differ in a great aspect, which is Aqidah. That's Al-Albani. He's mentioned the Hanbalis. He said they differ in Aqidah. Remember we talked about this last week? Which Hanbalis we talking about? Al-Albani said there's different Hanbalis. The Hanbalis of Najd or the other Hanbalis, they got different Aqidah. This is Al-Albani. He said, and this is a specific way, is the Aqidah of Tawheed. So the Hanbalis of Najd, they understood Tawheed with a correct understanding. They understand from this Tawheed what negates different types of shirkiyat, of idol worship and worshiping of others than Allah, right? He said, and the favor of this returns to this understanding to Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. That's where they got it from, right? He said, he is the one who renewed the call to Tawheed from the different types of idol, of making partners for Allah and worshiping idols in the Najd areas, following the Mujaddid before of this da'wah, and other than none other than Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. Yes. Al-Albani talking about that. And he said that Ibn Taymiyyah, he said, didn't come with something new. As his follower, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, he renewed the call of Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And he said both of them, they remove what rusted the hearts of the believers from deviation from the correct understanding of Tawheed. Surely the Hanbalis here in Syria, they fought that da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. They rebelled against that. And the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab spread with time and closeness of country to country, right? And it moved to the country of India, and then to Egypt, then to Syria, and this da'wah keeps spreading till it'll cover the whole earth, inshallah. But let me go down a little bit, and I'll stop at this. Wait a minute, let me finish. He said, now look, he said, this is realizing the statement of Allah. He is the one who sent his messenger with guidance and the religion of truth, so that it will prevail over every other religion, even if the idol worshippers dislike it. He said, this is a brief statement about the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, which it is the renewer of the da'wah of Ibn Taymiyyah. And it is giving life to the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdullah for Tawheed. This da'wah is called the da'wah of Tawheed, and they call it a da'watul Wahhabiyah. Then he goes on, and I'll stop after this because this is very important. He said, and they call its followers Wahhabiyah. Wahhabiyin. That's what they call the followers of that da'wah. He said, the reality is that this name differs. If it is referring from the side of the practical side, it is something that we shouldn't say is blameworthy as a name calling, right? But if it talks about the terminology identifying a place, then from the side of Arabiya, it's al-Wahhabiyya. And it is validifying them, giving them validity. It's tazkiyah, purifying them. Because Wahhabiyya is related to al-Wahhab, and the Wahhab is Allah. So the Wahhabi, as a form of grammar, it is giving of the terminology of Rabbani, like following the way of Allah, lordly. And this is purifying or validifying the Wahhabiyya. It is not blaming them. Subhanallah. So he took what you said as a name. He said, nah, this is nice, calling us Wahhabi, because we're after Al-Wahhab. That's Al-Albani. So the term Wahhabi, right? They knew it, and they ain't shy from it. They say, just, you shouldn't, that ain't the name we call ourselves, but if you want to call us that, we stand strong on this da'wah. Now, what was the da'wah of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab? What was his da'wah? Al-Albani said it. What are they teaching? His books. Now, in our question, we got to ask ourselves, are we going to follow that da'wah, or are we going to follow what the others knew as the da'wah of Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, Al-Ashariya wal Maturidiyya? That's our question as a people. And I think for us, that's the question we got to start asking ourselves. Right? Where are we really at? So they playing name games, but they're getting away from the reality. Are we going to follow that doctrine? That you notice all the scholars, they only talk about Ibn Taymiyyah, Muhammad ibn Abdul, is skipping generations. What about the chain of narration? Wasn't what Ibn Taymiyyah died 728. Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab died in 1206. You're talking about 500 years later. What was all the Muslims doing? Ibn Taymiyyah was in Damascus, and he said that the Hanbalis of Damascus in Syria have a different belief than those. What was that different belief? That's something to think about. Al-Albani said that. He said they had a different belief. So now these people talking about we're authority. Which belief you got? Is it Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab's belief? Or is it the belief of those Syrians who differed from them? Those Hanabila who were in those lands? That's a good question. And if you have a different belief, why are we talking about that? Shouldn't you be clear about that? Why is it left on us to clarify your stuff? Because really, and here's the clutch, a lot of them are still Wahhabis. They just got a new name. A lot of them are still Wahhabis with a new name. And since the name is identifying idea, and there's no problem with terminology, as Al-Albani said, and it's tazkiyah for you to say you're a Wahhabi, as Al-Albani said, why do you have a problem of identifying the issue? After all, he is Muhaddith al-Asr, right? He is the hadith scholar of the time. So if that's what he said, even if you don't want to call yourself, he said it ain't a big problem. Because we own Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab. We own that. That's what we about. Now, speak just as clearly as he spoke. And that big scholar of your time, the head of Al-Jarh wa Ta'dil, said, hey, man, Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab books, that's what we own. Don't hide it. Put it out there just like they did. Right? Lay it on the table. Put your cards out there. Right? And wait a minute. I'm sorry. I said it was over. I'm sorry, Imam Faheem. I know you're going to get me for this. But
I ain't going to get you. I'm going to get Ghost.
1 second. Look what he says. Al-Albani. I wanted to put this. So he said, he corrected. Because this is something interesting too. This is Al-Albani talking. He said, so after going through it, he said, so the right way to ask the question is, what is Salafiyya, not Wahhabiyya, right? And what is the da'wah to Salafiyya? And what is their belief? What is their aqidah? And what is the difference between them and the rest of the Muslims? Now we're going to answer. We say that the difference between the Salafiyin, the Salafis, and the other Muslims is a difference of methodology, minhaj. The Muslims from Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah are divided from the aspect of Aqidah into two groups. Two of them, Al-Maturidiyya and Al-Asha'ira. هذا في التوحيد والعقيدة. They are the Maturidis and the Ash'aris. I put my hand there. I'm not making it up. Al-Albani said it. I don't mean to put my fingers, right? This finger better, right? I hope y'all can see that. He said they are Al-Maturidiyya wal-Ash'aira. Right there. Right on this line. The end of the line. Right? So I said Ash'ari Maturidi, so they're Al-Albani. He mentioned it. It ain't like they don't know. They know. He said that's one group. And this is هذا في التوحيد وعقيدة. He said وفي الأحكام الشرعية. In the legal rulings, they are four madhahib. Hanafiya, Malikiya, Shafi'iyya, Hanabila, Hanbaliya. In Aqidah, they are what? Maturidi, Ash'ari. In fiqh, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. This is Al-Albani. He said, As-Salafiyun, the Salafis in Aqidah, they are Salafiyun. And they built their Aqidah on the Salaf. He distinguished. That's Al-Albani. So why get mad at me when I say Ash'ari Maturidi? He said it. And he added a second group called Salafiyun that Imam al-Haddad didn't know nothing about. Muhammad Murtada Zabidi knew nothing about. But Al-Albani, you know. The real Hufaz, Abdullah ibn Salam al-Basri in Mecca, Those great who thought they knew nothing about that. But this guy come, oh, he got another, this is another version of Ahl Sunnah. He admit, they said Ahl Sunnah al-Asha'ir and Maturidi. In fact, they are Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. But in Aqidah, there's another group called the Salafis. Come on, man. I didn't write the book. This is their stuff, right? But the old saying, all we got to do is don't read. They didn't tell us anything, right? You don't read, tell you anything. And there's the books. And the pictures were there. I put it up. There's a copy. You can go look. His words. You can go look. You can read it yourself. I leave it up. You can take a picture if you want. There it is. You can look. He said it. If it don't fit, you must have quit. Subhanallah. May Allah help us. May Allah help us.
Amin.
And guess what? So don't make it personal. These are their scholars. That's what they said. We know what our scholars said. They were very clear. We read what Imam al-Haddad said, what Muhammad Murtada al-Zabidi said, what Ibn Hajar al-Haytami said, what all of those great scholars said. That's what they said. It's there. It's in the books, right? The problem is, now you know why they're giving us those shiny pamphlets. They don't want to show us what's in the book. We might start thinking, and that's dangerous. Start thinking for yourself. That's a problem. Start being able to research and investigate and realize you're pulling the wool over my eyes. May Allah help us. All right, I'm out. We finished. May Allah make it easy. All right, who's closing now? Who's going to the store? The corner store.
Okay, alhamdulillah, I think Imam Naeem opened up, so I'll close. So we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving us this time and this opportunity to share this information with you. We ask that it was a benefit and that it was, something to make us ponder, make us think, and make us reflect. And most of all, make us realize our deficiencies in knowledge and help us to increase and to learn and to research. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, Talabul ilm faridatun ala kulli Muslim. The seeking of knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim. So let's continue to research, investigate, and also be ready in a position to challenge some of these ideas that have been bombarding us for, half a century, so we playing catch up. And we ask Allah to increase us in good knowledge and beneficial works. Amin. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Al-Fatiha. Alhamdulillah.